It'll tell us. No, there we go.
There it is.
Good.
Got it.
Yep.
Got it. Yes, I've got it. Good evening. Welcome to the Planning Commission on August 24th at 2021. This is an electronic meeting. This meeting is being held pursuant to and in compliance with Ordinance number 20-A 16, an ordinance to ensure the continuity of government during the COVID-19 disaster. Opportunities for the public to access and to participate in the electronic meeting will be posted on the Albemarle.org community county calendar when available. Madam, would you establish or would you call the roll, please?
I think we're having some technical difficulties there, so I'll take over.
Okay.
Commissioner Keller,
Here.
Commissioner Bailey,
Present.
Commissioner Claiborne,
Present.
Commissioner Moore,
Present.
Commissioner Carazana,
Present.
Commissioner Randolph.
We didn't hear you, Rick.
Oh, present.
I believe I just admitted Commissioner Firehawk, who's connecting now. And Commissioner Bivens.
Here.
All members are present.
Thank you very much. Are there matters not listed on the agenda from the public? Let's see if that technology is, can we hear her?
Not right now. She's gonna have to
Okay, she's gonna
jump out and jump back in. So
Okay.
we'll follow back up.
So if we didn't have anyone, and Mr. Rapp, can you see if there are people with their hands up wanting to speak from the public?
Yep, let me touch base with our folks on the other side.
Okay, thank you.
You hear me, Mr. Bivens?
Yes, we can hear you. Welcome.
Okay, I'm here now. Sorry, I don't know what was going on.
That's okay. You're with us, and that's all that matters going forward.
Yes, sir, I'm here. I'm ready and I'm here.
We've done it. We've established that we have a quorum. And
Okay.
I was simply asking whether or not you saw or you had anyone from the public who wanted to comment on matters not on our agenda this evening.
No, sir, we do not.
Okay, thank you. Then we're going to follow up with the consent agenda. Does anyone care to pull the items, either an item or the items from the consent agenda this evening? Okay, seeing none, is there a motion to accept the consent or to move forward the consent agenda? It's moved by Tim, seconded by by Corey. Madam, would you call the roll for the vote, please?
Yes. Mr. Claiborne?
Aye.
Ms. Moore?
Aye.
Mr. Bivens?
Aye.
Mr. Randolph?
Aye.
Ms. Firehawk?
Yes.
Mr. Keller?
He didn't say, oh, you're not frozen, are you, Tim? Oh, we can't. Oh, he can't get unmuted. You're muted, Tim. But I saw him wave affirmatively.
Yes. And Mr. Bailey?
Aye.
Thank you.
Tim, would you like to say it now?
Aye.
There you go.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you very much. So we're going to move into SP 2021-00005, discussion of the Halt property. May we have the staff report, please?
Good evening, everyone. Can you all hear me?
Perfect.
Great, thank you. My name is Andy Reitelbach, and I'm a senior planner with the Albemarle County Planning Division. And tonight we are here for a public hearing for the Hawked Property Day Camp proposal, which is application number SP 2021-5. So to give you some context in where this property is located, it is located in the Samuel Miller Magisterial District off of Batesville Road. You can see the two parcels that are the subject of this special use permit request highlighted on the left side of the screen. In the top right of your screen is the community of Batesville. I've labeled some of the nearby roads to give you some better information on where we are, Batesville and Craigstore Road. And then this area may look familiar because several months ago, another special use permit application came before you. And that was recently approved by the Board of Supervisors for Central Virginia Electric Cooperative solar power generation facility. And that actually is contiguous to the parcels that we are here tonight to discuss. It's to the southeast of the subject parcels across the Meachams River. And this is a more zoomed in site of the Haupt property. Margaret and Richard Haupt are the property owners and the applicants. They own two parcels that are contiguous to each other. They live on the property and their residence is up there in kind of the north central portion of the larger property. You can see the entrance. There's actually two entrances, and the entrance I have labeled is the entrance that would be used for the proposed day camp that we are here tonight to discuss. There are several ponds on the property, one on either side of the property. As I mentioned, the Meachams River forms the southern property line. And then, as I said earlier, the CVEC solar facility is to the southeast. So the zoning of this property, both parcels are zoned RA, which is the rural areas. And there is a overlay zoning district as well, the flood hazard overlay. And that is only on the southern portion of both parcels along the Meachams River. All surrounding parcels are also zoned rural areas. And then the proposed, the requested use, which is a day camp, is permitted by a special use permit in the RA zoning district. And then regarding the comprehensive plan, similarly, these two parcels and all surrounding parcels are designated as rural areas in the county's comprehensive plan. And that designates, the uses designated for rural areas are the preservation and protection of agricultural, forestal, and open space lands and natural, historic, and scenic resources, along with low density residential development at 1/2 unit per acre. So the specifics of the proposal that we have here before us tonight is a request for an amendment to an existing special use permit, which is SP 1989-110, which was approved back in March of 1990. The applicants, Margaret and Richard Haupt, are asking to expand the existing permitted day camp use to increase the number of participants allowed from the maximum of 10 participants, which is currently allowed under the 1989 special use permit, up to a maximum of 50. And this would include 42 campers and 8 staff members. They are also asking to increase the number of days of operation of the camp from 30 days per year to 45 days per year. And then they are asking to add an additional parcel to their special use permit. Currently, the 1989 special use permit only applies to the larger of the two parcels, TMP 85-3A. And so they are asking that the other parcel, 85-3A1, also be added to the special use permit. And together, these two parcels total approximately 103.56 acres. The camp would operate for 5 days per week, Monday through Friday, for 9 weeks throughout the summer months, June through August. So that would be the 45 days they are requesting. And the camp would operate 8 to 5 for staff members, and then the campers who attend would be there from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. There is no overnight boarding or camping proposed. It would just simply be a day camp. The only new construction that the applicants are proposing with this is a proposed future pavilion for camp activities, and that would be constructed on the smaller of the two parcels, 85-3A1. And I have a little more information about the pavilion in a later slide. And then there would be minimal grading and clearing proposed for the maintenance of trails and the driveway entrance on the property, and then of course for the construction of the pavilion. And before I go any farther, I did want to just provide some clarification, because there actually are two special use permits under review by the county now, proposed to be operated by the Living Earth School, and they are both in the Samuel Miller District, one on either side of the community of Batesville. So the one that we have in review before us tonight is the one on the left side of this map, Hopped Parcels, which is SP 2021-5. And then there is another application, SP 2021-13, which is on the Israel Mountain Farm property, which you can see on the right. That application is still under review by county staff, though I do believe there has been a community meeting held for it. And so that will probably come before you all at some later date. But for tonight, we're only looking at the two hopped parcels to the west of Batesville. So some more information about the two properties and the application. Both parcels are located within the Batesville Agricultural Forestal District, as you can see in the figure to your right. There are the two highlighted parcels, and then there are several other parcels scattered around that are also part of the Batesville AFD. So because these parcels are within the AFD, they did go before the AFD Advisory Committee on March the 16th of this year for review by that committee. And a majority of that committee did vote that this proposal is in accordance with the purposes of the agricultural and forestal districts as outlined in the county's ordinance. The Nature Conservancy holds a conservation on the larger of these two parcels, TMP 85-3A. And then there are some supplemental regulations found in the zoning ordinance for day camps that I wanted to bring your attention to. There's only the two. One is that appropriate health department approval of any wells, sanitary facilities such as septic fields, outhouses, that sort of thing is required before a day camp can begin operation. And then any sort of outdoor burning, whether that's outdoor cooking or campfires, does require approval, notification to and approval by the Albemarle County Fire Rescue Department. So this is the concept plan that has been provided by the applicant, showing the two parcels and showing where the various activities and facilities for the camp would be. The staff parking and turnaround drop-off would be kind of in the center of the property, behind the Hops residence. There is a future pavilion that I mentioned located right along the property line. And then there are two ponds that could be used for swimming. And then the rest of the over 100 acres would be used for various activities. And the applicants have stated that the 42 campers would be divided into smaller subgroups and dispersed throughout the property throughout the day. So as I mentioned, there is the proposed pavilion. That is the only new construction that is proposed with this application. And I've identified on this map the rough approximate location of where the applicants are proposing this to be. It is outside of critical slopes. It is right along the edge of the Meachams River floodplain. So kind of in a flatter area of the property. And then the closest property line, since this would be kind of a more node of activity for the camp, it is approximately 200 feet from the property line with the Central Virginia Electric Cooperative property, which is, as I mentioned previously, across the Meachams River to the southeast. There is just one recommended revision by staff to the application that staff believes should be made prior to going to Board of Supervisors, and that is providing an estimated maximum square footage of the footprint for the proposed wooden pavilion. Just to help better understand exactly how large that is proposed to be. So factors for consideration, there are several factors favorable to this request. It is consistent with the county's comprehensive plan. Minimal disturbance of the land does allow for the continued ability of agricultural and forestal production on the property, protection of the water supply watershed. The Meacham's River is within the South Fork Rivanna River reservoir watershed, and the conservation of natural resources. And then, as I mentioned, it was determined by the AFD Advisory Committee to be in accordance with the purposes of the agricultural and forestal districts. Factors unfavorable are that the use will generate additional vehicular trips on the surrounding street network through the village of Batesville and along Batesville Road, which I should mention is a gravel road. However, there are several conditions that staff has included in the special use permit that staff believes will reduce trip generation, and the applicant has indicated that they would use a bus and carpooling to further reduce the trips that would travel along Batesville Road as they go to and from their proposed day camp. So staff does recommend approval of the special use permit SB 2021-5, the Hawk property, with the following conditions, and provided that the one recommended revision is made to the application prior to the Board of Supervisors public hearing. So there are 9 recommended conditions, and the 9 are: the first one is kind of the standard condition used for special use permits, that development of the use should be in general accord with the concept plan that has been provided, and reflecting the essential major elements such as the camp entrance, the parking and drop-off areas, the location of the future pavilion, and the location of the outhouses and privies. And then, of course, minimum grading and clearing would be allowed to locate sanitary facilities and the pavilion. And minor modifications that do not conflict with the above elements can be made to ensure compliance with the zoning ordinance, other county laws, and then state and federal laws. And of course, minor modifications do have to be made with the approval of both the zoning administrator and the director of planning. Condition number 2 outlines the hours of operation for the camp, 5 days per week, Monday through Friday, for a maximum of 45 days per year, June through August, from 8 a.m. in the morning to 5 p.m. in the evening, and no overnight boarding or camping. Condition number 3 would limit it to 50 people per session. As I mentioned, it would be about 42 camp attendees and 8 camp staff. And then regarding transportation, bus and carpool trips would be the primary means of transportation to arrive at the camp. And then Vdot has identified that the entrance would meet low volume commercial entrance requirements. So the daily trip generation would not, could not exceed Vdot's requirement for that. And then 6 is that health department approval is required for all well, septic, and outhouse facilities. Number 7 is approval by the fire department for all outdoor cooking and campfires. And then to ensure impacts on neighboring properties are mitigated, any outdoor lighting that is ultimately proposed would have to be a full cutoff fixture and shielded to reflect light away from abutting properties. And if the applicants do choose to do outdoor lighting, the lighting plan would need to be submitted for approval by the zoning administrator. And then sound amplification of any type would not be permitted. So those are the conditions that staff recommends be placed on this special use permit. These suggested motions are here for when we get to that portion of tonight's meeting. And then I'm available for any questions either now or later in the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there questions for questions for staff at this moment? And if you'd unshare that screen, that would be just a tiny bit more helpful. Okay, there we are. Any questions for staff at this particular moment? No. And I have one. So at this moment, we can wait till we come back. Since this is an amendment of the conditions that are there, how many of those conditions are already in effect?
The existing special use permit has about 8 conditions, and some of them staff is proposing to get rid of because they're no longer relevant. And then the others are usually being amended because they were the conditions that limited the hours of operation and the attendance levels and days of operation.
So there isn't really an overlap of what we're proposing, what we're reviewing this evening versus what is already existing. Because some will come off, and these are additional ones which are pertinent to this evening's request.
Correct.
And then are we also understanding under one where you have the location of the future pavilion that you'd also sort of put a slash there in maximum size?
Yes. Yes, that's
fine. Are there any questions? Thank you. Are there any other questions? Yes, Rick.
Andy, can I focus in on number 4 under recommended actions, which is on page 7? And my question is that the statement is bus and carpool trips must be the primary means of transportation for camp staff and attendees. How does the county propose to assess and verify compliance with this condition?
So for the busing, when a zoning clearance is issued, they can, as part of the application, show that they have at least contracted out a bus or something of that nature. And carpooling is something that, of course, would fluctuate probably day by day, is sometimes not always every student or attendee would be able to carpool every day. So that's why it is somewhat open, but allowing, ensuring that the majority of the attendees do carpool every day. And I don't know if zoning would have any additional thing to say about that or not. I believe Francis is on the line today.
Thanks, Andy. Commissioner Randolph, I understand your concern about that particular condition, and the applicant may be able to speak to that a little more as far as what they are promoting when it comes to how they are asking, knowing the concerns of the area and how they would promote that as that. And it would be difficult, but we would follow up with it as needed if we got the complaints that were that was identified. Somebody made a complaint that they felt that there were too many cars, or that somebody was watching what was going on. But it's some of these unfortunately we're not able to actually be out there and watch every single and make sure everything. But this particular one, I think, is one what we do have to take that on their ability to their saying that they're going to comply with that. You could attribute that to a couple other ones as well, as far as even say if they did some fires out on site and they didn't get permission from the fire official to do that, we would have to follow up on that and see and verify whether that was founded or not. So it's different things like
that. Thank you for the explanation. I guess really the word that I was just raising a question about was primary. Did primary constitute a percentage, a majority percentage? That section of number 4 just seemed a little vague, and I was trying to get a better handle on the specificity that's behind it. So thank you very much for that.
Other questions before? No. Okay. May we hear from the applicants then? Mrs. Haupt.
I think I'm unmuted. Is that? Well, I thought I would use this few minutes that we have to explain why Rick and I want to have the nature camp operating on our land. And I've written a few words. We are concerned about our rapidly developing county and the decisions that will be made by the next generation. How much development will this next generation allow? How much green space will they demand? Will the importance of biodiversity be recognized? What will be done to reduce our community's contributions to global climate change? These important decisions will be made consciously and unconsciously by future generations. We believe our county will best be served if these future adults have childhoods grounded in nature, in an appreciation of the quiet of a pine forest, the deep pleasure of swimming in a spring-fed pond or a fast-flowing river. As a fellow resident of Batesville Road, I share your concerns about traffic on the road. I'm an early morning walker and often dodge dump trucks and fast-driving commuters, usually between 7 and 8 a.m. Yes, there will be an increase in traffic at 9 a.m. and 4 p.m. for 9 weeks in the summer. The trade-off will be the opportunity for 42 children a week to spend time in the woods, meadows, ponds, and river on our property. It's a trade-off we think will benefit us all in the long run as we support the development of a generation of environmentalists. We are grateful to have lived on this beautiful piece of land for 45 years. We placed our land in a conservation easement with the Nature Conservancy as one step in preserving it. But in addition, we would love for our legacy to be that we made it available for children. I hope you will support our request for this special use permit.
Thank you. Are there questions for the applicant? Corey?
Actually, I have a list of questions, if you don't mind, and I think they'll be pretty straightforward for the applicant. First, could you share a little bit about how you got to number 50 for us?
The number 50?
Yes, ma'am.
I believe that number was recommended by the county as being a number that would be appropriate. I don't think we came up with the number. I think the county suggested that number, but my memory is not my strongest suit. So I'm not absolutely sure where the number came from.
Do you think, I guess another way to ask the question is, do you think that you will max out in the summer, or is that number allow for future growth of your camp?
Oh, I think, the camp, of course, it's not our camp. It's the Living Earth Schools camp or a nature camp in general. So Rick and I are not planning to run this camp. And the Living Earth School has been in operation for over 20 years, and they fill up immediately as soon as they open up. It's a very popular camp. So I think it will max out the first year. At 50, at 42 kids. But I also feel that that's a number that is sustainable for this size property. Honestly, I wouldn't want the number to be any bigger than that. So that's plenty big. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you. And I have more questions. So it might be that the person who runs the camp, the school, if they want to jump in and answer them, that's totally fine. What's the age group of the students or the children?
The age group.
Sir, would you please identify yourself?
Yep, sorry about that. I'm Scott Cunningham. I'm the Director of Operations for the Living Earth School. So I'd be running the day-to-day programs on the land. In answer to your question, the programs that we were looking to run at this day camp were from age 5 up to 17. So that's the targeted group. And this was utilized as a site for day camps just for summer use for us to expand and deliver our services.
Thank you, Mr. Cunningham. And
Sure.
What's the role of staff? Are they the eyes and ears to make sure that the children are within the property lines? And can you just talk a little bit about the role of staff?
Sure. So first of all, our camp staff ratio is very low, which it is 6 participants or campers to 1 staff, which is extremely low because of the type of instructing we do. This instruction that is going on is nature-based around silviculture, permaculture, understanding identification of plants, understanding tracking, animal tracking, identification of animals, understanding the whole ecosystem and how children as a person belongs to this environment and is part of the living earth. It's to build their environmental awareness and the understanding of where they fit in what we call earth. Did that answer your question?
It does. I just have two more, and kind of the subsequent question to that follow-up is just trying to address the concerns of the folks that have written in about children perhaps going outside of the boundaries and maybe crossing over into their property. Is there a plan to put signage up within the compound to make sure that folks are within the property limits?
Well, the property lines are pretty well defined. We haven't ever had a problem in the 19 years. Most of the time, in fact, if you look and talk to the neighbors that we've been friends with over those times, they've actually invited the kids into their land, but we're very responsible. It's, we're teaching kids how to be responsible within nature, and we respect other people's boundaries. It's not a loud, crazy camp. It's a heck of a lot of fun. We have mud days, but we've never had a problem with neighbors. We've been a very good neighbor, and we can bring in some references from the many years at Sugar Hollow and others.
Thank you. And last question. I'm sorry for the interrogation.
That's all right.
How will trash be handled?
As an environmentally focused, very easily. We do a really good job. We'll take it out, we'll deal with it. But we even have kids. We manage the micro trash. There's not going to be a lot. They bring their lunches in. They pack their trash out. We're not going to be cooking. We're not providing any food service. So it's all brought in, and it'll all go out with them. So we do a lot of repair, leave no trace, and naturalizing of the areas that we've been in, which is why it's also important to keep the numbers low. You think 100 acres is a lot, but putting kids on it and having them walk through, play games, assess things, it does create an imprint. So it's a good size. 50 is about the right size for that.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
You're through, Corey? You're through? Okay. Anyone else have a question for the applicant or comment for that? Daniel?
A couple, and I'm not sure exactly if it's the property owners or the day camp director of operations that's best to answer the first question. But with regards to the shelter, I guess one thing that through the summer, there's often thunderstorms, sometimes severe thunderstorms that can pop up and be a bit unpredictable as far as their track. So I guess one thing that I wanted to understand a little better is the shelter. Can it house 50 people underneath of it? Does it have grounding to handle? Is there lightning strike or a direct strike? I know I read in the concept plan there was some mention of tents, maybe near the drop-off area, temporary tents, but that might help with water. But I guess what I'm trying to understand is, in the event of a severe thunderstorm, how has that been handled, currently at your current facility, as well as, as proposed for this new facility?
Sure. The weather is very unpredictable, and we noticed that in the second week of August when we had 4 straight days of lightning storms come across camp. So we put them into a shelter. We would, I'd have to look at the size of that pavilion, but there's also other outbuildings that would be available in this location that the kids could shelter into. But we have a comprehensive plan to manage for the risk. And we're constantly watching the weather to manage that. So we'll make sure that there's enough appropriate coverage and the right coverage, and the kids can have the appropriate pickup and ease of pickup when those incidents happen.
Do you currently use any type of bullhorn or any type of notification I play golf, and often on the
Yeah.
golf course, they'll
Yeah.
sound an alarm to seek shelter given the inclement weather.
Well, we have several things. First of all, we have the bullhorn. Secondly, all of our instructors have walkie-talkies, so we're in constant communication. So we have those communication methods, and we have a number of security protocols, because it's not just the weather we worry about, it's visitors that are not invited onto the campsite, and other things we have to worry about. So, but yes, we have multiple communication levels of security to get that message out. Layers, I guess, is the better word for it.
And so just to circle back to the first question, what is the size of this pavilion? Is it intended to be reasonably sized to host the full group? Is it going to be smaller where it can only host a partial amount of the group, for not just for whatever activities, but for any type of weather event?
Yeah, well, two things. One is like a standard tent will not protect you from a lightning strike. A pavilion, as
Correct.
you said, will have to get you up off the ground or be grounded to protect you. But that's typically one. But I don't have the size of that pavilion to say how many people would fit in that and what protection would provide. But we do have there's a barn on site, and there's other buildings there that can be utilized. But it is something I'll have to take a more in-depth look at.
Okay.
I
And so is
apologize.
this barn part of the hops? I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name, your last name. My sincere
Cunningham,
apologies. And I was referring to the property owners. Is the barn available for use for the Living Arts School? Has that been agreed upon, or that I'm just looking at the concept plan, and I don't see the barn listed as a facility and an outbuilding to be used by the school. So I was just trying to get a sense of where that was in the concept plan.
I can speak to that. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
The barns actually, according to the Nature Conservancy easement, the barns would not be available, not because we would specify that, but the Nature Conservancy would not allow them to be used. So I think, it's a really good question, and I think it's important, and I think we just haven't gotten that far yet. The pavilion hasn't been built yet, and we don't have the specifications,
Right.
but that certainly will be addressed. We are aware of these late afternoon lightning storms, and of course, want to make sure the kids are safe.
Understood. Thank you, ma'am. I have one more question, and then I'll relinquish. It was written in the concept plan that all water will be brought in by a camper. I do know that we do often have 100-degree heats in the project narrative. I guess that I question that, as far as, does the camp also, or Living Arts School, bring in other coolers in the case, there's only so much water you can typically tote in as a camper for a whole day of consumption. So I guess it was listed that there was intended to be no water facilities in the plan, or well or fed or something like that the campers have to bring that in. So I don't know if you could speak to that, of how additional water or water refills will be handled for the campers.
I didn't write so we always have large 5-gallon water buckets throughout the locations of where campers have their setups for whatever activities they're doing. Sometimes we have brought in water, sometimes we just utilize the hose or the well water at the site. But every camper we have, when they come in with two water containers for themselves as part of what they bring to camp on a daily basis. So they bring in 2 thermoses, and then we provide additional consistently.
Understood. I have one more question, if you'll permit me, Chair. With regards to the privies, we really didn't have a concept of that. Are those going to be permanent structures, or are we looking at, it was referred to as state-of-the-art privies? I'm not sure how to interpret what that is. Is that a really nice, temporary plastic kind of container, or is that intended to be an improved structure, with a potable, water ran to it and everything?
I can speak to that. This is Margaret. There is an outhouse that has two different sections to it. And I actually have a picture of it that I could send you. They're really nice outhouses that are constructed, wooden, professionally constructed. And one other thing, there is a pump fed by our well that is right there near the drop off, so that there is water available.
Okay. And I'm assuming that those privies that exist there are approved by TNC to be existing on that side of the land. In the
Yeah.
interpretation letter.
Yes, they have been approved.
Sorry for the details. I that's all the question I have this time. Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate those questions and the thoughtfulness of them. Thank you.
Are there others who have questions for the applicant? Then we'll go to the public hearing, and Carolyn, are you there? Are you there? I will open.
Yes, sir, I am.
Do we have?
First, are you ready for the public speakers?
Yes, please.
Okay. First, we have Jane Fellows. Jane, let's see.
Hello.
Okay, Jane, you have 3 minutes to speak. As soon as you start speaking, please state your name and address.
Okay, my name is Jane Fellows. My address is 1915 Thunder Ridge Road in Batesville, technically some Afton mailing address. Our property was the property that you saw on all of the vignettes that Andy showed at the beginning. We're the only property that shares a long water border with the house on the Meacham side. And then the other property owner on the other side of us is the new solar energy farm going in that has already been approved. So while my opposition to this proposal is both personal and also on behalf of the larger Batesville community. From a personal point of view, having children and staff, 50 people, Monday through Friday for the entire summer is, 1/4 of this year, and we will be impacted by having a commercial operation on the neighboring property. And it feels like a big imposition, a big ask to us. It feels like an imposition of somebody else's desire. And I feel like their freedom to do what they want to do on their land should be limited by how it impacts other people. And so their freedom ends where my freedom begins. And I feel like this camp will be an imposition on the way we live every day of the summer. We also spoke to our liability insurance company, who said that our liability insurance will definitely increase and that we might become uninsurable if there's a camp next door. So that is really significant. And I think that the county needs to really take that into consideration. There are other neighbors who had similar liability concerns, and I don't know if they're on these calls and sending letters, but they've spoken to me directly. And the other thing is, Margaret was talking about future generations, and what's to say that once this special use permit is approved and now expanded, that future development and the next owners of this property don't expand it even further. So I'm just trying to limit my losses here. Property values next to schools, camps, and playgrounds go down, and people do not like to live next to camps. All the camps in this county, the neighbors have talked about that it is a disruption and they don't like it. And even the Girl Scouts. What?
Your time is up.
Oh, darn. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll have your husband, does your husband still want to speak?
Yes, he does.
He'll be after the next speaker. We'll bring him back up.
Okay, very good.
Thank you. Next, we have Chris Hawk. Chris, you have 3 minutes to speak. Please state your name and who you're affiliated with, and your time starts as soon as you start speaking.
Good evening. This is Chris Hawk with the Piedmont Environmental Council, also known as PEC. We support county staff's recommendations, given the property's A, inclusion within the Batesville Ag and Forest District, B, existing conservation easement on the larger parcel, C, 0.86 miles of frontage on the Meachams River, and D, location on a rural gravel road with limited access and safety maintenance measures. PEC recommends that the following be added to the approval. 1, update county staff recommendation 1 to include additional pavilion siting requirements, requiring that it must be constructed outside of the floodplain, water protection ordinance buffers, and critical slopes. 2, update county staff recommendation 4 to require a documented plan for off-site bus and carpooling to provide A, certainty that the primary means of transportation for on-site users is not via single vehicle trips, and B, clarify the definition of primary and that to clarify the definition of primary means of transportation. 3, update county staff recommendation 5 to include Vdot's definition for low volume commercial entrances, as it would further clarify within the permit that daily trip generation must not exceed 50 vehicular trips per day. 4, prohibit paving the existing dirt road or additional roads that would lead to the proposed pavilion. 5, include TNC's letters dated January 31st, 2020 and February 4th, 2021 to ensure that the special use permit is consistent with the terms and conditions of the conservation easement. And lastly, require forested buffers be maintained on property boundaries to A, avoid adverse impacts on adjoining landowners in the Meachams River, and B, reduce the impacts of any future septic impacts that could arise from on-site privies. In addition to these above recommendations, PEC asks the Planning Commission and county staff to further consider, explore, and discuss the insurance liability implications raised by adjoining landowners. The 2 on-site swimming ponds could create additional liability and insurance implications for adjoining landowners, as the tax maps and concept plans both show the swimming ponds as being co-owned by the applicant and adjoining landowners. The following questions have arisen during previous discussions for similar uses in Albemarle County's agricultural areas. Is there a landowner agreement that could help settle insurance and liability implications? Should the applicant's insurance policy include the adjoining landowners as additionally insured parties, given the potentially shared ownership of the swimming ponds? And lastly, as the requested use requires a special use permit and is not a by right use, could the adjoining landowners have predicted the proposed day use camp and swimming ponds when acquiring their property? Thank you for taking the time to listen to PEC's concerns on this matter. Please feel free to reach out to me with any additional questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Next, we have Bill Fellows. Mr. Fellows, if you'll unmute yourself, please state your name and address, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak as soon as you start talking.
I'm sorry, Bill Fellows, 1915 Thunder Ridge Road, Batesville, or Afton, Virginia. I guess my main concern are all the question marks that are involved in this. And they say they'll do this, they'll do that, they'll do this, but there's nothing to police who's going to do this. It's the responsibility of the house. I don't think so. Responsibility of the neighbors, the county. It's just an impossible task. There's an open fire burn law, and I guess they could get around that if they want to. But with the dry conditions now, I'd be hesitant to allow that. 50 people on the land, that's a huge footprint. If we're talking about being stewards of the land, you're certainly not being a steward if you're violating your neighbor's rights. And if you read the definition of what a steward of the land is, it's the river that runs through your land that continues on downstream. It's the property that borders all the other properties. So it's a huge concern for me. If you look at the possibility of maybe 30 cars, it's 30 cars going in, 30 cars coming out. going back in, coming back out by those houses on that road. It's not just a one-trip deal. The return trips twice. The impact that they're going to have in the questions that are unanswered are difficult to wrap my head around. I've known these folks for a long, long time and know they love that land. And I'm not trying to discourage the use of their land, but it's impossible to do what they're going to do and still respect that land. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. And we do not have anyone else at this time that wants to speak.
Thank you very much. Then I will close the public hearing and then bring it back to the applicants for a short response or a short 3 minutes to sort of speak, add any information if they feel inclined to, only if you feel inclined to. Yep, Mrs. Houck, you need to unmute your page.
Yes. I don't have anything prepared, so just bear with me as I fumble along. There is a really long frontage on the Meacham's River that our property includes, and a very small part of it adjoins the Fellows property. We have tried to assure them that no camp activities will take place across from their property. There's, it's more than 100 acres, and there are lots and lots of opportunities for these kids to explore without there ever needing to be visible within hearing or sight of the Fellows. And it's very important that we respect our neighbors, and we will certainly do everything we can to make sure that that happens. I would contest that both ponds are on neighbors' property. The property that adjoins the Gathrights, it is near that border, but our property line, our property includes that whole pond. It's not partly on the, it may look that way, but we've seen the sight lines and everything, and it absolutely is not on the Gathright property. The other pond, I guess I can't speak clearly to that. There may be a piece of it that is on an adjoining neighbors. I'm not positive, but anyway, we will look into that. So.
Go ahead, Rick.
Yeah, I mean, I was a little astounded by the strength of the complaints of the neighbors. It sounds like we're going to run a military camp or something and be shooting, doing military type activities. And this is so different than anything like that. And I guess I'm just concerned about what the public might think after those statements. It's, as Margaret focused on earlier, it's for kids to come out here and enjoy nature, and that's our primary focus. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Houck. Thank you.
So could I just for a moment address some of the questions?
You only have 1 minute, sir.
Okay, so this summer we tracked our carpooling. Even through COVID, we averaged 2.6 kids per car. So given that the county averages 3-person in carpooling, during COVID, we were at 2.6, which puts it about 16 or 17 cars. We're very focused on creating carpools with all the people that sign up. That's a part of our our focus. So we understand traffic, we're working towards it. And that's it.
Thank you. Are there commissioners? Where are your thoughts? Thank you both, Mrs. Houck and Mr. Cunningham. But commissioners,
thank you.
Where are we? Tim?
I'm positively inclined towards the applicants.
Karen?
Yes, I did not make a lot of, ask a lot of questions because I've actually thoroughly studied this proposal and I have also been out to the site, walked the boundaries, walked the paths. This is a heavily wooded site with already established paths. I can testify the privies were quite lovely. And I would say that I do think that this is a very light footprint on the land. I think the separation from the neighbors is adequate, and the house assured me that while it might be the case that the children would need to walk from one point A to point B and might pass near the property boundary, they're not going to be engaged in activities there. There's also a high ratio of counselors to children. So I don't think there's the concern that we read in some of the comments that children will be running off property, swimming the river over to the neighbors, and other concerns that were raised. I also do not believe it is in the purview of the Planning Commission to get engaged in people's liability concerns. The Planning Commission does not review people's liability policies. We do not get engaged in assessments of liability risk. And so I just think that that is not an appropriate avenue for us to be exploring. In terms of carpooling, again, I've also talked with the folks who proposed to run the camp, and they seem to have great experience already running summer camps. It's not their first camp, and they've engaged in extensive carpool planning. So I am not concerned that this site would actually be a nuisance to the neighbors. I absolutely appreciate the need and importance for quiet enjoyment of one's own property, but I don't believe that 50 campers on a large site greater than 100 acres is actually going to be a disturbance. And I hope that it isn't. So I'm very favorably inclined towards this particular proposal. And just to say, I'm not in favor of a camp on every rural property in Albemarle County. There are many places where it would not be appropriate. But having looked at this site, I think that this site is very well buffered, and it's a camp with that it will be managed by people who are truly environmental stewards. I think that if you were to put 50 cows on this land, it would have a lot more impact than the 50 children proposed. So I'll leave it at that.
Who else? So we have Tim, Karen. Who else would like to? As a statement or as a qualifying? Rick?
The only thing I would add to Karen's peroration, and I echo her sentiment, if not a camp here, where in Albemarle County, you really would have a difficult time finding a more ideal site than this location. But I think Daniel's line of questioning does lead to a need here for us to make a recommendation that the pavilion have adequate square footage to accommodate 50 people in case of inclement weather. I just think that's absolutely essential in a wooded location. Otherwise, we're setting ourselves and campers up and parents up for not a very pleasant outcome. So I think that's something that is absolutely an essential here, and that pavilion needs to be built sooner rather than later for the protection and welfare of the campers and the staff at this location. So that's something that I think we should add as one of the conditions when we get to that. But otherwise, I'm enthusiastic behind that. And I know if there are any problems, since Mr. Hawk was trained by Woody Hayes, he would be able to tackle anyone untoward on the property and take them down very, very quickly so that they would not represent a threat either to neighboring properties or to the welfare of the campers.
Okay, are there other comments? Karen? Oh, wait, let's go to Corey first.
I just wanted to follow Rick because it's relevant to what he said.
Okay.
Just quickly, I guess it is kind of a question for staff at this point. You know, Mr. Hawk noted that Mr. Hawk, sorry, I'm messing up his name, with PEC was mentioning a concern that the pavilion not be sited in the floodplain or on steep slopes. And I wouldn't imagine that the county would permit that structure to be within the 100-year floodplain or on a steep slope. It's not, I mean, it's not a, structure with 4 sides to it, but nevertheless, I wouldn't think the county would allow that. So I don't see that we would need to make that a condition. And I'm putting that out because I would like staff to respond if I'm not correct on that.
Francis?
Yes, so that was a concern initially when we wanted to know what that location was, talking with the zoning administrator and the county engineer, both being the floodplain and the stream buffer there. We did not have any issues, and the ordinance would allow that as the open structure, the 4 posts with a roof, basically. And it's kind of at that edge, the outer edge of the floodplain in the woods, just beyond that opening, that field opening. So that was a concern, and we believe that that was still, as far as initially what that was there, and we believe that the ordinance does allow it, that kind of a structure to be in the floodplain and even the stream buffer as regulated by the county engineer.
Thank you.
Okay, Corey?
Just circling back to Commissioner Randolph's recommendation, I think if we add that, it'll be important to manage expectations. And so if you're going to do that, perhaps put in accordance with the Virginia Uniform Statewide Building Code, which would give you a square foot per occupant for that kind of that gathering there. So you wouldn't want is for the applicant to come back with square footage X. You're like, there's no way that'll fit 50 people. Prove it to me. So just manage expectations on that one would be my advice.
Okay, Daniel?
And if it is, as was mentioned by the applicant, if it doesn't have a floor, it needs to be grounded to be actually, I don't know if that would be covered in the building code or whatever, but that would be very important. The last thing, I don't want to move on. I can come back to me. I'll let other people talk if there's more discussion of the pavilion. I do have one question around the ponds and swimming activities. I can come back to that later if necessary, or I can
You're there.
raise that concern.
You're there. Why don't we go for it now?
Sure. I am also positively inclined to support this. I do have some questions or concerns because when you pull up the Albemarle GIS, it does appear that the pond does sit on the border between other neighbors' property, and it seems I don't know what the zoning or agreements are necessary for making sure that swimming would be permitted in a jointly owned pond with your neighbors would be. And so I guess that's more of a question to the county staff on how would that be handled with regards to a water body that is on multiple properties.
Okay, I'll ask our counsel to just sort of give us a sense, but I think
Mr. Bailey, just a caveat, and I think that the applicants alluded to this. For starters, the boundaries that are shown on the GIS are approximate. They're not necessarily legally definitive. To the extent that the boundary line actually does split the water body, it would be the same as if property owners would be obligated to keep their uses within their property boundaries, even if that boundary goes through the middle of a body of water. So technically, any uses that the hops might have of the property, or their guests or invitees or campers, would technically need to stay within the boundaries, even if the boundary line went through the body of water. To the extent that campers or any invitees of the hop went over that property line, conceivably that'd be a private civil matter between the hops and their neighbors, not necessarily something for the Planning Commission to regulate.
Perfect. Thank you for that.
Okay. Thank you, counsel. Jenny, did I see you raise your hand to adjust your glasses like me, or are you wanting to say something?
I agree with what others have said, and I'm positively inclined. I think I do have a few questions in my mind, but I think others have brought those up or shared that, that's not necessarily our purview to answer all that. I did notice that And I like Rick's suggestion about having a condition that talks about the pavilion and the capacity. I noticed when Mr. Cunningham was talking about, what would happen in the case of an emergency and talking about using the barn, that the property owner was aware that, it seems like they're saying that the easement wouldn't allow for that, for those structures to be used. And so, sorry. So I guess I would just encourage you all to make sure you're on the same page with that part, what the easement does and doesn't allow. I know we have attachments that are from the easement holder, but I did sort of pick up on that seemed like maybe something you guys need to get sorted out between you, but otherwise I definitely support the request.
Anyone else? No, so I will say that I suggest that I support the request also, and have a sense that from my view, I think it's helpful to have a diversity of businesses that take place in our rural area, or activities that take place in our rural area. And so while I'm sensitive and aware of some of the concerns that have been raised to us through letters and through our communications, I also have a sense that the present owners of the property, the house, have a commitment to making this work in a way that is not onerous to people around it. And that I would believe that the school has one of those easy things. So if the school ticks people off, it'll be very clear next year what happens in our community. People tend to not be shy about expressing their concerns when things don't go the way that they anticipated going. So I think there's some sort of market forces that will help to ensure that people do what they sign up to do and what they declare that they'll do, particularly in a public setting, and particularly if this goes forward to the supervisors. It's a very public forum, and so expectations will be there. And I think the two parties will have to manage their expectations and manage their public personas on this idea. So I would support it. I support this also. And I also support the idea that we would be a bit more prescriptive, Andy, a bit more prescriptive in how we look towards the pavilion. So if you've got additional language for that you can insert there, I think that would be helpful for this process. Karen, do you need to say something?
I was just going to say I'm prepared to make a motion that incorporates the earlier discussion about the pavilion and
Right.
see if it's of satisfaction to my fellow commissioners.
Would you bring that up, please? I think it's going to pop up on our screen shortly. We can have a commission cat. Well, that's okay. We can have a commission pet, Jenny.
I'm glad I'm not the only one.
Yeah, Karen has hers, and we haven't seen Rick's pup in a while. I don't know if he's been put outside or something like that, but
He's outside with Susan.
He's outside with Susan. Okay, so we have pets. We have our mascots. So here we are, please.
All right. So I move that the Planning Commission recommend approval of SB 2021-0005 Haupt property with conditions 1 through 9 as outlined in the staff report, with the following modification to condition number 1, location of the pavilion. I would like to add, in addition, the pavilion's per person capacity and footprint of the foundation be added.
Now I need to hold on. I'm gonna squeeze some people in so I can see more of you. They're okay. Yes, Mr. Herrick.
So Commissioner Firehawk, is there an intended capacity that you would like to add to that condition, first of all? And second of all, would your motion also be including Mr. Reidelbach's suggested revision? Because that was part of the suggested motion, but I didn't hear it in your motion.
You lost me on the last part.
Okay, so let me do one at a time. You had indicated that you thought that the capacity of the pavilion ought to be specified. And
yes.
My question to you is, does your motion include a limit on the capacity?
No, it's not specifying a limit on the capacity. I just want to it be specified what it is for, so people can
Okay.
judge whether or not it's adequate to support the 50 campers and staff.
And then my second question regarding your motion was, did you intend for your motion to also include Mr. Reidelbach's suggested revision? Because that was part of his suggested motion, but I didn't hear it as part of your motion. So
I'm sorry, I have his staff report with condition number 1 and all of what is the additional revision? I'm sorry.
So he had, I don't know whether, Mr. Reidelbach, whether you want to unshare your screen, maybe go back to your suggested revision, but there was a one revision in addition to the 9 proposed.
Okay.
Yes, so the one revision I had, and it was related to.
Oh, yes, okay.
Pavilion.
Okay. All right, so then I could amend my motion to, since that, yes, include his revision, which is what I was trying to say, but in addition to know the footprint of the pavilion as well in square feet.
So then, Mr. Reidelbach, if you could go back to your original suggested motion. And Commissioner Firehawk, does the suggested motion there cover everything that you're looking for now that you know what the revision is?
It does, except that I did not see that it also included the footprint of the foundation.
Okay.
Karen, do you want to be a bit more specific on the footprint and incorporate Andy's?
Sure, okay.
images?
I'll just make it, should I just make it again?
Please.
I move that the planning commission recommend approval of SB 20210005 Haupt property with conditions and revision as recommended in the staff report. And to condition number 1, please also specify the square footprint of the foundation.
Okay. Is there a second for that? Seconded by Tim. Is there any discussion? Ms. Schaefer, would you call the vote, please?
Yes. Mr. Bay, let's see, Mr. Bay.
Aye.
Mr. Keller.
Mr.
I
Keller.
didn't hear.
Mr. Keller.
Aye.
Ms. Firehawk.
Yes.
Mr. Randolph.
Aye.
Mr. Bivens.
Aye.
Ms. Moore.
Aye.
Mr. Claiborne.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. So where are the Mr. and Mrs. Haupt? As you've heard from this evening, that the commission will be moving this forward to the Board of Supervisors with a recommendation for approval. And you also heard, I think, from our colleagues, a number of items that you might want to that we would suggest working with Andy, that you're more specific before you bring this, add a bit of specificity to the project when you go before the Board of Supervisors. Okay. So on that note, thank you both for bringing this to us, and we hope, and as you know, you'll work with staff for the next date and for revisions that may need to be you may need to consider before moving forward. But thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you, Andy. And thank you, Francis. Okay. So we have a presentation this evening. Oh, is a presentation different from a work session? Or are we just being presented to? Charles.
We plan to this. Well, this has already gone to the board, so we are sharing it with the commission for your information, and we'll certainly welcome feedback. But it's a project underway that Kim's been working on for quite a while, and we thought it would be of interest to the commission. So it's more set up as a presentation, but like I said, we'll certainly welcome feedback.
Thank you very much. And I will apologize ahead of time, Madam. And I think we have with us this evening Kim Biasoli, and I hope I didn't do too poorly by your last name.
That's all right. It's Biasioli.
Biasioli. Okay, so if you would introduce yourself with that proper pronunciation and tell us a bit who you are, and then let's go into our presentation and ask us if there's anything that you'd like from us. It's helpful if you ask the commission for things as opposed to just letting us, because we'll take it over and you'll have a very different, you'll have a completely different report by the time this is over.
All right. Well, I will share a presentation. I'm Kim Biasioli. I'm the Natural Resources Manager for the county. And I'm going to talk tonight about the Stream Health Initiative project. And this is a board initiative. So it's like Charles said, it's an informational session, but of course I welcome any feedback and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have as we go forward. So I'm going to talk about the whole project tonight, but mainly focusing on phase 2 of the project, which is focused on improving stream health in the rural area. And so some of you might be familiar with this project, but I'll just provide a little background to give you the big picture of where this started. This project began with the creation of Albemarle County's Natural Resources Program in 2015. And one of the primary objectives of that program when it was established was to conduct a review of the stream buffer requirements in our water protection ordinance. And so through that work grew essentially this bigger project. And in 2017, staff were directed by the board to develop strategies for improving stream health throughout the county. And so staff at that time, this was a really broad objective. So they divided it into 2 phases. The first phase being focused on development and working with the development community to come up with different strategies and solutions for improving stream health. And then phase 2 being more focused on rural area land uses. And some of that, of course, focus on the rural area also includes development because, of course, development is occurring throughout the county. So you can see from this graphic that phase 1 is still ongoing and some of that work is moving forward in parallel with the phase 2 work that I'm going to talk about tonight. So before I get to that phase 2 work, I'll just give a quick update on some of those key outcomes from phase 1. So some of the proposals that were adopted or completed thus far were, first of all, let's see. The first one was related to increasing requirements on steep slopes for erosion and sediment control. Secondly, to allow erosion and sediment control measures only in the outward 50 feet of stream buffers and with mitigation. There was a general fees update, and that also included increasing fees for repeat violations of the ordinance. Some general updates to the water protection ordinance, primarily clarifications, and specifically one clarification related to the requirements for forest management. So requiring stream buffers or stream side management zones, as they're referred to in the best management practices manual for forestry for Virginia. So requiring those stream side management zones to maintain the exemption for forestry. And also bonding for maintenance of stormwater management facilities. Also, 2 of the original phase 1 proposals were related to education and outreach, and we've been working really hard to address those through a lot of the work we've been doing in phase 2. So there's another subset of the phase 1 proposals that have not yet been adopted or completed, but they are supported by the board. And those are not adopted yet, mainly because they're pending allocation of resources. So the first is an update to address incremental development. So essentially where there's repeated applications coming in just below that 10,000 square foot. And then
could you say that again? Could you say that again, please? You broke up on the last bits of incremental development.
Oh, sorry. So incremental development is it's essentially when there are repeated applications coming in just under that 10,000 square foot threshold on the same property, year after year. or fairly close together. So that is meant to address that issue. And then the second one is to have some additional standards that dictate when 2-layer erosion and sediment measures would be required. And lastly, implementing this 25% improvement factor and these 2-layer erosion and sediment control measures, specifically within sediment TMDL watersheds. So moving into phase 2, again, that's focused on the rural area. What you're looking at here is the timeline that we set out for this year for the project. And even before this timeline last fall, we were working on planning and material development. We formed our stream health team. That's an interdisciplinary team with folks from different departments in the organization, and also developing a lot of educational material and opportunities for the public to engage with the project, both through the website and the public input site. So in this first stage, so we divided the year into these 4 quarterly stages. And the first stage really focusing on education and outreach, listening to the public and hearing what was important to them, and also providing some education through a 7-part webinar series with technical experts talking about different aspects of stream health. And then in the second quarter of the year, we worked with a stakeholder work group. And of course, those folks volunteered their time, and they're all members of the community with different levels of interest and expertise in the subject matter. And so with the work group, we had a number of conversations through Zoom, and worked on defining really the vision and goals for stream health in our community, and then brainstorming different strategies we might employ in order to address those goals. And now you can see we're in the third quarter in this developed stage where we've brought those strategies back out to the board and back out to the public. We're receiving feedback from the board and from members of the public, and really starting to work on developing some of these strategies into more fully fleshed out proposals, where we can really evaluate and analyze the costs and benefits of each one. And then moving into the fall, we will, into the decide stage, we'll be bringing those final proposals back to the board for some decision making. And then of course, implementation of any of these proposals is going to extend well beyond 2021. So we started out with over 40 strategies that were proposed to us by the public and mainly by the work group. And we worked with technical experts to kind of whittle that down into the ones that we determined would have the most impact. So they either had a medium or high impact on stream health. We're generally supported by the stakeholders we talked with, and at least the ones that participated in the project, or we felt would have a high likelihood of success, of course, with appropriate staffing and resources. So in addition to those specific criteria, there's a lot of other constraints and considerations, of course, that we have been evaluating and will continue to as we move forward, on through the project. So I'm going to move into sharing with all of you the strategies that we recommended to the board in July. And this is one of the attachments that I provided as the table. It doesn't exactly match because there were a few that we've removed from the presentation that were not supported by the board, and one additional one that was not recommended by staff, but was encouraged by the board for us to add it back in and continue exploring and developing into a proposal. So to organize the discussion, generally, we group those strategies into these 3 main categories. And those are new or revised regulations, incentives and voluntary opportunities, and monitoring, education, and partnerships. So I'm going to go ahead and share the strategies in each of these categories. I'm not going to provide a lot of background information. It's late, but there is some analysis in the table, and I'm happy to elaborate, clarify, or answer any questions at the end. So the first category is new or revised regulations. And you'll notice as we go through these slides, there's 2 additional pieces of information at the bottom of each one. And that's the next step, either to initiate proposal development, if our stream health team felt we had enough information to do that at this time, or it will say assess opportunities if we weren't really sure and we needed to do a lot more research to figure that out. And the second thing is alignment, and that's where this proposed stream health strategy aligns with a strategy that is included in either the climate action plan, that's the CAP, or the biodiversity action plan. Those are listed as the BAP. So as we go through, you'll see a lot of that. There's a lot of overlap in those strategies, and they're cross-referenced here. So in newer revised regulations, the first strategy is to reestablish countywide requirements for perpetual retention and management of 100-foot stream buffers, with exemptions for agriculture, forestry, and other limited land uses. The second one is to strengthen restoration requirements and guidelines for when agricultural or forested land is converted to residential use, and also for mitigation when violations of the water protection ordinance occur. The third one is to amend the zoning ordinance to clarify that environmental restoration projects, and specifically stream mitigation and nutrient banks, are permitted by right throughout the county, subject to consistent regulations for their review and approval. Next is to review existing policies and regulations to identify opportunities for better alignment with the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Act. And lastly, to adopt the full Chesapeake Bay Preservation Act voluntarily in our county. And this is the one that was not recommended by staff, but recommended by the board for staff to include in our proposal development. The second category is incentives and voluntary opportunities. And the first one is to establish a riparian buffer easement program focused on protecting water quality, specifically through new riparian buffer easements in high priority areas, and by strengthening existing whole property easements with additional provisions to protect stream health. Next is to establish a conservation easement assistance program to help landowners with the transactional costs of placing land under conservation easement. The next one is to create a stream health improvement fund that offers assistance to landowners engaged in conservation or cost share programs, and to support specific restoration projects that benefit stream health. The next one is to support existing cost share programs that promote best management practices to improve stream health. And finally, explore options to encourage on-site treatment of stormwater and minimization of impervious surfaces by providing an incentive for low impact development practices. And then the last category of strategies is monitoring, education, and partnerships. And the first strategy here is to develop a countywide water quality testing program for landowners that could also serve as a screening tool to help identify waterways that would benefit from long-term monitoring or stream health improvement projects. The next one is to expand and formalize a new landowner education project. The next strategy is to support expansion of education programs for students and a coordinated watershed-wide approach, especially at the middle school and high school level. And explore grant opportunities to support stream health restoration, conservation, and education projects and programs. So that's all the strategies. And I'm happy to hear any feedback or make any clarifications or answer any questions if you have them at this time. I'll stop sharing so we can see you all.
Thank you. So I will. Thank you very much. That was actually very helpful. So I've got questions, but I'm going to let our colleagues go. I see Rick's taking himself off mute. So Rick, go for it.
Hey, this is very encouraging in terms of the amount of work that you've done. And I want to compliment you and the volunteers in this process. Just a couple of observations, and I say this as somebody that worked with 3 watershed organizations in states to the north. The first is when we look at analysis and discussion under section 2, Kim, incentives and voluntary opportunities, A. I would go down to your subpoint 1, encouraging donation of riparian buffer easements to the county. One thing that needs to be thought through is how the staffing will need to occur and how managing these easements will occur. I wanted to put a thought out there, and that is, if the county is going to start encouraging and accepting donations of riparian buffer easements, should we include an easement dedication fee for the county taking over these easements? The reason I ask this is when you get down to section C, you talk about creating a stream health improvement fund. The one thing I've learned in 4 years working at a different level in the county is that unless you have dedicated money, budget cycles can end up restricting the flow. You can crimp the hose. And so the resources don't get to where they need to be. And recession, McSession, every single year, water quality is going to need to be addressed. In fact, you can make the argument that when the economy goes in recession, that's when mischief takes place in the riparian environment, more tires, refrigerators, et cetera. So getting a way of funding this that is going to be ongoing, that it's not episodic, periodic, you're not depending upon the political will of the Board of Supervisors, whose members can change every 2 years, 3 can change. So I think that I would urge you to look at that. Under Roman numeral 4 in A, you put down conducting a review of stream buffer provisions and existing conservation easements held by ACA in Albemarle County. Great intern project for a summer, just ideal intern project, very specific focus. Student would just lap up the opportunity to work on that. Under B, establishing ranking criteria to prioritize geographic areas. Absolutely important to prioritize, but I'm going to come back to this subsequently. I think there has to be a choice of essentially a beta. Which of the magisterial districts do you want to start with? And you could do that completely randomly. They could draw straws, you pick out of a hat, but I do think you need to start with one and tweak it and refine it, and then take lessons learned in working in that magisterial district. One could make the argument with Daniel and Corey here that you may want to pick a magisterial district that has the least amount of rural area rather than the most amount, because that reduces some challenges that I'm going to come back to. So on those, let me switch now to under section 3. A lot of discussion always at the board level. Can we have volunteers take care of this? Or number 2, can we have a nonprofit organization that we already fund take care of this versus adding additional staff to the county? And I would really urge looking into working with the RCA. And I divulge that my wife and I are contributors to the RCA, but since I worked with 3 watershed organizations and I had been part earlier of this whole effort to actually get the RCA to merge into becoming the organization it is today. But perhaps a P3 relationship with RCA is a model that should be explored rather than just adding staff, building bureaucracy, et cetera. Would be a good way to go. They do an outstanding job in water quality monitoring, I might add. And I would say that whether I supported him or not. And I think under the next point, under B, Albemarle County could do a better job highlighting what RCA finds. I mean, we try, and I know when I was on the board, we tried to incorporate what RCA annual or semi-annual water quality studies were finding, but it really wasn't part of the discourse as much as it could be. Just a thought. Now, under D, the last sentence said, exploring creative ways to educate the public and increase awareness of opportunities for landowners was identified as a high priority. We have a public engagement department. We've added a number of people over the last 5-6 years to that department. There has to be somebody there that can be helpful to you in this whole effort to try to educate the public about this process. And again, this is something that could be done with the RCA together. And I flip over to E, and you talk about the RCA. I think it's really important to integrate this with the Albemarle County School Division and the RCA and Albemarle County Community Development. And I'm sure Diantha brought that up at a board level. So I'm just going to reiterate that I think more we look at integration, especially because of our conversation on the last application on environmental education. There are young people and their young families that are eager to have their children learn this. So the more we can develop a partnership, a P4 type of approach, then the better off we'll all be. And finally, in G, you put explore ways to work with Vdot to reduce the impacts from public roads. I think especially that would be the case in terms of gravel, where slopes are at play. And here you could start with one magisterial district and just do the study and look at how gravel roads and slopes are having an impact on water quality. And that's where integrating with RCA, they could potentially come and actually do water quality testing at that location. My final point is not about anything in your phase 2. My final point is on page 2 of your summary, where you said there was broad support within the work group for utilizing a variety of these different approaches. However, representatives from the agricultural community expressed strong opposition to employing a regulatory approach for rural land uses. If we continue an approach that's based on voluntary compliance in the rural area, we are kicking the proverbial can down the road. And so what I would say is the proper way to approach that is to ask the question, what strategies, individual or in a mix, assure the best chances or probability of success in natural resource protection? Because doing it the same old way and just going along with the Farm Bureau statement that we're taking care of that, our animals are not in the watershed. And I'm not picking on the Farm Bureau, but I've heard that raised in a Farm Bureau meeting before. It just isn't proven to be accurate when you do the testing in those locations. And we're looking at the high levels of animal proteins in the water. So I just think you have to ask the right question. And with the right question, we get out of this whole, you're going to regulate it, you're shoving it down our throats. That isn't the question here. The question is, what strategy is going to assure the best chances of natural resource protection for the long term? Because we've got a watershed and drinking water supply that depends on those outcomes. So good luck to you. I'm delighted that you're here and you're working on all of these issues and you've made real headway. So congratulations.
Thank you for all those comments. there's a lot there to respond to, but I'll let the other commissioners provide feedback first.
Karen, did I see your hand up? Please.
Yeah, yes, and Liz Palmer asked me to give her comments originally on the presentation to the board, and I was told planning commissioners couldn't be on the stream committee because we would get a chance to comment in this venue, but I feel like it's a little bit after the fact, frankly, because it's coming to us after the board has already told you what they want. Nevertheless, in terms of the riparian buffer easements, the Thomas Jefferson Planning District Commission had a riparian buffer easement for many years, and as far as I know, it still goes. Were you proposing the county replicate that, or are you? I mean, I didn't understand. It seemed duplicative. Could you just respond to that?
Sure, yeah, and that's one of the things we looked into. So we talked with the district and also with other easement organizations in the county like PEC to really kind of work through this and what would be the best approach before we settled on it being a county program. And there's a few reasons for that. So the Soil and Water Conservation District does have a program. They're focused now at least more on mitigation, and it's also been more opportunistic. So it's really just anyone who will come to them. So we wanted to have more of a strategic, prioritized effort where we're really focusing on maximizing water quality benefits in the county. Also, their last riparian buffer easement in Albemarle County was recorded in 2003. So while the program still exists, it hasn't really been active. And talking with the district, they don't really have the capacity to expand it at this time. So I think we are in some sense replicating it, but hopefully in a different and more effective and efficient way.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
It does. That was very helpful. Also, just keeping in mind, of course, that there are other organizations like Friends of the Rivers of Virginia that hold riparian easements and have done so for many decades. So anytime we can partner with a group that already does this for a living and does it well, rather than reinventing the wheel or trying to duplicate something, to Rick's earlier point about fickle budgets and fickle elections. Just another couple quick points. In terms of TMDLs, total maximum daily load designated watersheds that are already impaired and have cleanup plans, when proposals come to the Planning Commission to review, one of my little pet peeves is it never states this property is on a TMDL stream. In other words, no additional consideration is made for the fact that that stream is already impaired, nor is there any recommendation from staff as to additional things that might be needed to be considered for a property that's coming to us. So I have sent emails about what is a TMDL till I'm blue in the face, and I just wish that that was part of the regular procedure for the county and that could be given some consideration, because we already know the water is impaired and we're adding more land disturbance to it. And you did make an excellent point too about earlier about trying to have stormwater management, especially for water quality, be taken care of on site instead of an off-site purchasing of water quality credits, which was enabled by the legislature several years ago and has really hampered our ability to get developers to actually do low impact development BMPs on site. They keep buying credits and we're worse for it. I mean, I'm not blaming them. It's a cheap thing to do, but it's not good for our streams. But I just want to end really quickly on, I would say the number one thing that we need to spend our time on is landowner education. If I was to go and do sort of a man on the creek interview in my watershed, I would bet that the majority of landowners have no idea that there is a stream buffer regulation. And the other part of that is they would not know why. There's low awareness of the, my neighbors dutifully mow to the stream, to the actual stream, not just they mow the floodplain, they want a lawn right to the edge of the creek, and they don't know that that's bad. I have gotten some neighbors to fence cattle out of the stream through cajoling, but I'm not going to be the one woman educator of the Sam Miller district. So I just think that a big push to get landowners to do the right thing by letting them know what the right thing is and why it's so important is really where we need to put our energy. Also, we have so many people moving in and out of the area You know, we have people who've been here their whole lives. We have people who've been here 1 year. And so, you know, just that it needs to be a constant re-education campaign as to why the county's doing this. And then in terms of adopting the entire Chesapeake Bay Act regulations for this area, I think that's a pretty tall order and will probably not get very far, but that's just my opinion. And I'll leave it at that.
Are there others? Correct, Tim.
Well, thank you for this. It's great to have you leading this effort and to see such an organized approach thus far. Building on my two colleagues' comments, I think that they have hit them very well. But after spending a number of years in the Midwest, where agriculture is king, and we know about the runoffs down the Mississippi and the bloom in the Gulf of Mexico, there are a number of farmers that I am amazed, given many aspects of their life, politics included, are big supporters of buffers and supporting buffers. So I imagine you're keyed into it, but I really encourage you to reach out to the National Association of Conservation Districts, which is actually headquartered in Johnston, Iowa. They're really into the public education side and bringing farmers who have amazingly successful operations, who believe in the importance of buffers, to speak with other farmers. I think, you know, Rick and Karen have both hit on this. To my mind, you know, just seeing, you know, the very on table 1A, and then there's the exemptions for agriculture, forestry, and other limited land uses. We know why it's there, but I don't know that this is really as hard a nut to crack as it is. It's been set up as a we they instead of an us, and I think that there are ways to get at this that are actually quite beneficial to the farm community. So that would be my message to you, and if you want to follow up with me on that, I have some more ideas. I spent a lot of time with farmers in the field in Iowa over the last 30 years. Thanks.
Other comments, observations? Well, while I'm waiting to see if my colleagues, I will sort of share a couple of things that I think if I could extend Rick's image of kicking the can down the road. My concern is that we kick the can to the development area, because I was going to ask, when you put up the your phase 1, where you had those six different issues that you were talking about there, whether or not we'd see any overlap or any commonality between the phase 1 approach with the developers and the phase 2 approach with the agribusinesses. Because my sense is that even though these are two business types, so there's the ag business and those who build homes and commercial and other places, that the people who do their business in the development part of our community are treated differently than the people who do their business in the rural or the agri part of their business. And my colleagues have pushed me to the right to farm legislation that's it there, and I get that. So I understand where I'm actually plowing a field that's got a lot of bedrock in it. But what my concern is that if Albemarle County is talking about creating a space that allows both people to come here and to build new lives, whether or not that's on a what we might see as the traditional farming with cows and sheep, or the new kind of farming that's taking place, which is with distilleries and wineries and breweries, that kind of farming, that there seems to be a disconnection between the regulations that are applied to two businesses. So I'm getting away from the rural and the pastoral vision of what farming used to be, but get down to the fact that in Albemarle County, as I'm experiencing farming, that happens to be sort of downright cold calculated business. And many of those businesses are finding that the calculation works for them because they do weddings on their property. And that, while one might say that hopefully there'll be a new generation that comes out of that wedding, but that's not necessarily the crop that's going to be grown or going to be harvested there. So my concern is that as you move through this whole thing, that there's some commonality, or at least there's some parity that takes place in phase 1 and phase 2 of how we look at streams. And it's not necessarily just sort of aligned with the romantic image of what farming used to be in our community. Because I will share, as Karen shared about her stream, I sit on Ivy Creek. At the end of my property is Ivy Creek. And someone who wanted further upstream from me, they wanted to put a crossing across Ivy Creek. There's nothing but dirt between them, the 100-foot, and the creek now. So Ivy Creek that used to run clear, even when we get those torrential rains, we have plenty of soot and silt in it now. And so they get to do that because they sit on a farm. I could do it too because I sit in the rural area, but if we were developing something in the developed area, that would never have been allowed. And so how do we sort of have this balance to preserve the key thing in our that opening statement in our comp plan? If we really want this to be that beautiful and that place that people move to and come to live in and to grow prosperous and to grow wise, then we've got to figure out how the streams that are in the agricultural part aren't trumping the rights of the stream, aren't overseeing, I should say it that way, aren't sort of trumping the rights of the streams in the rest of the county. That imbalance is uncomfortable for me, certainly since I've become a member of the commission and had an opportunity to see how we treat two businesses. These are just businesses now. This is not, this is not me doing this because I have as a hobby, shall I say. These are people who are doing this as businesses, and I'd like to see some parity between those businesses. Who else would like to add to that? Okay, if you would like to share your thoughts back to us, that certainly would be helpful.
Yeah, sure, I will. So I have a lot of thoughts. So let's see where I can begin. I'll start, I think, with responding to Rick about the need for dedicated funding, and also you talked a little bit about staffing and including an easement dedication fee. I think those are all things that we're considering. Absolutely, staffing with respect to all of these proposals, and also resource needs and the need for those to be continual. And so with the Stream Health Improvement Fund, for example, there is a suggestion, and I don't know how feasible this is, but to have at least a portion of that fund be paid into when mitigation is not possible. So not really in lieu of mitigation for development projects, but and my understanding from talking to previous staff that we had that in the early 2000s, and you talked about the recession and things going away, that actually existed in Albemarle County previously. So we do have a model for it, and or having some existing dedicated funding would also allow us to apply for grants where matching funds are required. So there's a lot of moving parts, but I think working through all those details is sort of what we're doing now in this proposal development stage. Let's see. What else? Also, with you talked a little bit about working with other organizations rather than adding staff, for example, with the RCA water quality monitoring proposal. And that is exactly what we are proposing. They have the program already well established, and they have ideas for, how this could be expanded. And through this project, we've heard from a lot of landowners throughout the county who want someone to come out to their property and test the water on their stream. And so, they have their RCA and DEQ have testing sites throughout the county, but there's certainly a lot of opportunity for more of that to occur, and having it be a response to landowners' need. It would be somewhat of a random sample throughout the county that might identify, areas where there's some issue, contributing to stream health, but also long-term monitoring sites if there is a really pristine site. or areas that need to be targeted for restoration and further monitoring. So those are some of the ideas that we have, but certainly building on those programs, not with existing staff, and also with the education programs, it's the same. We are working to coordinate, hopefully, proposing to coordinate RCA and the Soil and Water's existing programs with some of the county schools, the science coordination that's happening there, and integrating that, if the county schools can accommodate it. So hopefully that addresses some of your questions. So certainly working with the school division, and absolutely with our public engagement department, we've been working with them throughout. We also have a lot of volunteer efforts already with the Natural Heritage Committee doing education. So we're trying to merge together some of these pilot programs that we've been testing and expand them and formalize them. And specifically, to your point, Karen, to new landowners in the county. So we have GIS tools that can help us identify when land is purchased and when it's purchased in a high priority area. So really targeting new landowners to help educate them about existing conservation and cost share programs and other just best management practices for stewardship as well. So all of that is definitely part of the program. And I want to mention also, Karen, that we are developing these proposals now. So the strategies have been developed, but I welcome your feedback, actually, any of you, as we go forward in the next few months. We're going to be really working on fleshing out these proposals. So we certainly will have more opportunity for receiving that feedback. Let's see, and focusing on TMDL watersheds. So that is, that's actually in the phase 1 proposal, the development related proposal, to at least one element of that, looking at those 2-layer erosion and sediment control measures. So that would be one way to do that, but there's probably other ways to integrate that into the processes and community development. So that's definitely good feedback. So I think those are all the things that I would like to address. I just also thank you all for your feedback, and feel free to reach out to me as well if you have other thoughts.
We thank you, and we'll look forward to, I guess, your next update or your presentation to us. I'm looking at Charles as he's nodding, since he's there, and I know I'll expect you to hear from Karen, and certainly from Rick. So and perhaps there are others who were a bit quiet tonight, but I believe you'll hear from Karen in the not too distant future. Anything else that anyone needs to sort of add in before we say thank you? Thank you for your good work, and have a good evening. Nope. So thank you for your good work and have a good evening. And we'll see you soon, or we'll see you next time that's appropriate. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you all for having me tonight.
Okay. Bye-bye now. Committee reports. Who has committee reports? No one has committee reports. It must be are we on hiatus here? Okay, I guess we're on hiatus. I will say yet again, even though people probably knew about it, if you've got this last sort of moment that you're going to go on holiday before you just have to stay home again, please let us know. And for some people who are traveling to exotic places, be safe in your travels. And we'll hopefully see you when you come back on that piece, since we don't have any committee reports. So on that movement, we'll go to Charles from the August 18th meeting, if he would like to share anything.
Sure. Thank you, Chair Bivens. We had a couple of special use permits that went to the board on the evening of the 4th for the Manu Park application. Remember, came for this board to increase their the area for their 4 fields. No increase in intensity, but just additional field usage. That was approved by the board. And then afterwards, it was the Blue Ridge Swim Club. Again, some modifications to their special use permit, and that was also approved by the board. And then last week, I had the pleasure of trying to explain a little bit about net density and gross density to the board, which is really just something we need to work on in the comprehensive plan, I think, in our ordinance updates to pick a direction and clearly define which we do, because as I'm sure many of y'all know, we have certain things in our ordinance, certain things in our master plans, and certain things in our comp plan, and none of them really align. So we've got a work cut out for us in the near future to try and figure out the direction we want to go and clearly articulate that. So we'll be working on that soon.
Well, that will be one of those evenings where I hope you don't pack the schedule for that, but you just let us wrestle with that term, because I think there's a number of people here who would just enjoy that moment.
Certainly. I will I look forward to that discussion. Yeah. I wanted to also give an update on, I know several of y'all have asked about meetings and if we are head back in person or not. So I will say a while ago, we did start making plans to eventually get back in person, but we have paused that here at the county based on the current statistics with COVID, the new Delta variant, and recommendations from the health department. So we will continue to monitor that, but for now, in the foreseeable future, we will continue this Zoom meetings, virtual meetings all throughout the county for us. And continue to monitor the situation and follow the guidance from our health district. So as things evolve, we will certainly update y'all and encourage everybody to stay safe. And I'm sure one day we'll be back in person, but for now, this is the world we will live in.
Thank you. Anything else? Questions for Charles? Karen, your fiber was brilliant this evening.
It was.
So whoever you had to bake cookies for,
It was the
right
county.
amount of cookies.
I have to say, it was the county of Albemarle that applied for multiple grants to help the people of Southern Albemarle get online. And it was the third try was a charm. So it's taken us almost 4 years now. And here we are on the internet.
It was all because of those Swedes. It was ABBA.
Well, we certainly, I can say, and as hopefully others can compliment, you did not break up once. We did miss the kitty though. Yeah, we did miss the kitty. You know, you had the more cat, but we missed your kitty too. All right, any other items for old or new business? No, okay. Well, do we have any items for follow-up? Nope, okey-dokey. Well, then we know we're not meeting next Tuesday, and we're not meeting the Tuesday after that. So the next time that we'll be together in this form will be September the 14th. Did I get that right, Counselor? You know, I have a problem with. All right. So we'll be together on September the 14th. And not that this matters, but pay attention to when you can vote, you know, in person or by mail, so that you can keep yourselves and those you love protected. Okay, because that's opening up soon, and I don't have the date in front of me, but it's an easy date to get. And for those of you who might have had resistors in your family that said when it becomes legalized by the FDA, it happened. So you can suggest that those who were waiting and who can have it, they can now go get a vaccination. On that note, folks, we're 3 minutes over. Have a good night. See you in a couple of weeks, and be aware of the heat, because I've seen a number of people have had heat stroke. So if you don't have to be out there, it's rough. See you in a couple of weeks, folks. Oh, there's Karen. Be safe in your travels, everyone. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Okay, there we go. We've done it yet again. Have we done it yet again?
Well done. Successful meeting.
A successful meeting. And I actually did go and read that chapter. And after I read that chapter, Charles, I went, oh, the Commonwealth still views itself as being a land grant colony from Great Britain. You know, that whole chapter on agriculture, I read that and said, oh, this is basically you do whatever the hell you want to do. And we're gonna not let any of the jurisdictions that you may do what you do in curtail that.
We've got some work cut out for us.
Yeah. So.
Yep. Well, I don't know how we ended up with a couple of more empty weeks, but we did. There must have been a reason to the scheduling, so we'll see.
Okay.
But we come back in September and it's packed, so.
Yeah. So you give people a bit of a break, and we both know that the commission doesn't do well if they have to sit around for a lot of hours. So you better,
We've gotten into a good rhythm. We got about 2 things every night now.
Yeah,
And we're
I think everybody seems they're smiling more and they're engaged more with that. I think so. And we
Agreed.
All right,
All right, buddy. We'll have a good evening.
Yeah. Talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Hopefully see you soon for lunch at some point.
Yeah, for sure. Let's try and set that up. Yep.
Okay. Bye-bye. Thank you, Carolyn.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.